right. So yeah, that was Jasmine Augusto. We have our next guest coming up, Professor Daniela Gomez. There she is.
Hello,
Hello.
hello, hello.
Pew, 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 pew.
How do
Welcome.
you say what's up in Portuguese?
Boa tarde.
E aí, beleza?
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 Beleza.
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 Yes, we're keeping the cipher going. You're listening to Living in Hip Hop, conversations about hip hop education, episode 2, Groundings with My Sisters. We just talked with Jasmine Augusto, co-organizer, community partner, Trinity International Hip Hop Festival. Now we are introducing you to one of our featured guest participants at the festival who gave the opening lecture to start the festival in conjunction with the Patricia C. Charles H. McGill III, 63, visiting assistant professor of international studies lecturer. Dr. Daniela Gomez, just to give you a little bit of background, she has a PhD in African and African diaspora studies, an MA in cultural studies, media information, and cultural certificate, and a BA in journalism. She is born and raised in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and studies Afro-Brazilian and Afro-diaspora movements, particularly hip-hop. Her latest research is on hip-hop in Brazil, looking at the discourse of salvation and its impact in shaping a hip-hop cultural movement. She has been 2 years here at Trinity College as a McGill Fellow in the International Studies program, so she is also my colleague. She has been teaching courses called Global Hip Hop Cultures, Global African Diasporas, and Race, Gender, and Pop
In the
Culture.
cut on the low.
Yeah, and gave a really, really dope lecture called Afro Diaspora Circularities, the making of an Afro hip hop activism and the making of Afro hip hop scholar. Welcome, Dr. Daniela Gomez. Hi.
Hello, guys. How are you doing?
Good.
What's up?
Good to see you. Real quick,
Too.
just to let you know, you're the inaugural lecture, the opening lecture to the festival, which started on April 9th, and the most watched, most viewed. Just want to let you know that. So you really started it off, the festival, on fire. We don't have too much time, but Khaiim the Rapoet and I do want to kind of talk about a little bit just about hip hop studies, you being a hip hop scholar, but then also, talk a little bit about your lecture without giving everything away. You know what I mean?
And your bars.
Yeah, and your album. I know you never want to talk about it. See you look up like that, but we have to talk about it. So we're just going to start off. Yeah, Khaiim, actually, do you want to start it off? I'm going to leave it up to the
I came in the
artist.
door, said it before. I'm driving down with Tang Sauce. Shout out to Tang Sauce, longtime festival supporter, performer, host. And we're going to see Rock and Rhapsody and Toad's Place in New Haven. And I have this CD in the car, and I'm like, I've been sitting on this CD. It's from Professor Gomez. Like I'm gonna just be honest. Like, this is so awkward, but I'm gonna just it's been sitting there. This is cute. Like, this professor has a CD. This is cute. So here, I'm gonna throw this in on the way. You know what I mean? I put the joint in, and it's like boom, boom, boom. She's like, and I'm like, what the heck? And she's rapping in Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese, and like she's dropping knowledge, and literally I don't understand most of the words. So me as an actual peer and an MC, my first thing is I'm just hearing the musicality, like, no way. And then I'm looking Ep2, like one of the dopest producers and MCs. He's been at the festival out of Brazil. Shout out to Ep2, shout out to DJ Lalo. You know what I mean? I'm a big fan of his stuff, but like this is like the best stuff I've heard from him ever. And like she's killing it. And I'm like, oh snap. This is hip hop. Like, someone who can put an album together like this and spit bars like this, like just off the musicality and the way the rhyme patterns were going and the energy, like you get to teach about hip hop. You know what I mean? And I always, another one, he's telling you, but another one that don't want to brag, Professor Markle got bars. You know what I mean? Professor Markle's been in battle. Professor Markle was on the spoken word. See? You see? That's what y'all do.
About me, but actually he's hiding the gen as well.
And it's like, as an MC, I'm like, I feel comfortable with you representing me. I feel comfortable with you telling Black and brown and other kids and international populations what hip hop is. right? Because you're investing yourself, you're putting yourself on the line, and you're being so humble about it. It's like, that's something that great people do. You know what I mean? It's just like, I really do this. Like, I let it speak for itself. So we're driving down that whole way down there to see, because it's rare to see like a all women show in hip hop. So we're going down, but on the way we got one of the headliners right there in the car, and I'm like, oh my God, I was just like doing a guest lecture with her, and she really got bars. So I just want to, from the MC perspective, I want to set it off the right way, and I want to say kudos to you for using academia and your dissertation to find a way to make an album and do both at the same time. But since you do like play it low, and so many people who are like, you know, I do need to be respected. I'm not going to be victimized by white supremacy. I'm not going to let anyone write me off and say that like I'm not an actual doctor and I don't do this. How important is it for you to like represent as an MC and practice the culture? But also, can you just elucidate what are some of the conflicts as a professor that you kind of have to be out for, and knowing like, just like all of us get stereotyped, oh, she's a rapper. How difficult is it navigating that space and really being dope as an MC, but really needing to be respected as a doctor and a professor?
Yes, thank you. I think when I think about hip hop and as a scholar, right? I think the first step is people to understand that hip hop is a field, and that hip hop is not like just the music, but it's also a tool, a platform to understand different topics in the world, right? And that's what we do at Trinity, for example. Like hip hop is just like, I used to joke and say that my students come to my class, and I believe Professor Markle had the same experience. Like they come to class thinking they are going to party. That's the reality. They are like, okay, hip hop, woohoo! And then I have to catch them up and say, hey, come on, this class is fun. Yes, it is. But we are here to talk about social justice, about the African diaspora, about racism, about hip hop as a platform, a global platform that helps people to find a way to show their struggle and to fight whatever they think is necessary to stand for, right? And most people don't know that. And most people don't know that in academia. So let me tell a short story, right, about recognition of hip hop as a field. So one day my father got home, my late father, got home and looked at my mom and said, Laura, what is Daniela doing over there in the US? What is she studying? My mom looked at him and said, she's studying her PhD. No, yes, but what? Because I cannot tell people she's a doctor in hip hop. That doesn't exist, doctor in hip hop. What is she doing there? And then my mom told me, no, her degree is in Black Studies, Africana Studies. Actually, hip hop is her dissertation. But most people, not only my father, but most people, including in the US academia, have that confusion. Hip hop studies, what the heck's that, right? So for us who are part of hip hop, and when I say hip hop, I'm talking about people who really knows hip hop further than just the music, rap music. We know hip hop is deeper than that, right? We know hip hop can have impacts that is even hard to nominate how hip hop is going to impact lives, because we have different perspectives, and hip hop education is one of them.
I actually want to jump in there and talk about, in some cases for hip hop scholars, there's a dual challenge. On the one hand, not being accepted in traditional academy, they question that, right? And they make it very difficult if you're coming up through the academy to have as your research expertise in hip hop. So that's one obstacle. The other obstacle is actually in hip hop community because of their skepticism of scholars, rightfully so, particularly with some hip hop scholars. Danielle and I, we talked about this. There are some really good ones who are immersed in the culture. And there are some who are just like, I came in and out. I studied some young people for about a month. Now I'm writing a book on hip hop, a whole bunch of elements of exploitation. And you read this stuff and you're like, they don't know anything about the culture to begin with. And now they're writing about this. And now they're becoming experts and you have to cite them. And you're like, whoa, wait a second, right? So there's a dual challenge. What is more challenging, acceptance in academia or acceptance in the hip hop community from being a scholar?
Oh, that's huge. Those two things are challenges. I think two things that I can say about being accepted by the community. In my case specifically, because I researched the community that I grew up with, so I know people for a long time, right? Even people who I didn't know from my childhood, but I know like from my work back in Brazil, they know me. So they know who Dani Gomes is, right? So, and those who don't know, someone knows me and indicate me and say, hey, I have a friend, you need to talk to her and things like that. So that was easier for me. But what was the hard part for me was to create something that was real, was to keep it real, following the standards that academia has, and still keeping what they were saying in a clear way, without any, not manipulation, because that would not happen, but without like putting like words where they are not, right? And I thought that during my lecture that you mentioned during the talk, like that was my fear, having something real, because my committed, I know how to write, right? I know I would have revisions. I know how to play the game. But for my community back home, that would be something else. If I am here even today, and if people Google my name and someone speaks English and listen to me and say Daniela is there back in the US saying some kind of BS, people are going to knock my door and say, hey, who do you think you are? Right? And we see that all the time. So all this reputation on hip hop is very important.
Right.
So for me, my community, like not shame my community, not lie about my community, not also be like someone who is telling secrets that I should be telling, because we have to be careful with that too, right? When we are part of the community, like, because our work can become very dangerous in that sense, like putting people in danger. So that was my main concern. That was my main concern. Give back to them something real and something that they can look and say, hey, I am proud of this person because she's doing good things for hip hop.
I want to think about, and Khaiim, I want you to jump in first. But this thing that Daniela brought up about where you said, like, I can write, I can, do these things. Khaiim and I have been having an ongoing conversation of what it means to live hip hop. And what it means to live hip hop is coming from a cultural standpoint of you identify with hip hop culture and it's shaped you in some shape or form. I can make the argument for my personal life, even though I didn't write about or research hip hop coming through graduate school. That wasn't my topic, but I was a hip hop person. And what I learned from the culture armed me with negotiating through academia. So for example, like being able to freestyle, right? Improvisation, competitiveness. Like in academia, we are battling with scholars, right? That's essentially what we do. We battle. We're like, no, I wrote about this too. And so we have the battle element. All these things that I got from hip hop, you can apply as an academic. Can you talk a little bit about that? And before that, Khaiim, can you kind of flesh it out, that conversation we're having about being some people say I'm a Marxist, I'm a socialist, what it means to be a hip hopist, right? And how that helped us navigate through our lives as artists, practitioners, as educators in academia.
Yeah. So, like, one thing about hip hop is we know there's this idea of, a lot of people say the phrase making something out of nothing. And that's almost one of the closest things you can do to define, pardon me, you can do to define what hip hop actually is. But we know, like, when you're in it, you're not making something out of nothing. You're making something out of something that is an apparent nothing, that is marginalized to nothing, right? So I guess but to make sure that, like, you're getting the question here, have you noticed this? Have you noticed this increasing trend as something becomes popular and safer, but still cool and edgy, for people to kind of say, like, oh, I am that. Like, I'm that. Because that's one thing that KRS and the Temple always say, like, say I am this, right? But have you noticed this this idea where people are getting that they should say, I am this, or I am not this. Like, I am not a racist. Like, where maybe there was previous times where people didn't really care, right? But now it's like, I am this, I am not this. Have you noticed that along with the kind of appropriation where like they're just as equally adamant to not actually find out what that means and do some self-reflection, like, how am I represented? Like, how am I anti-racist? How am I doing what's better for hip hop and not just like having privilege in the cipher and using the space? How am I looking out for my community and other communities, right? Because one of the great things that hip hop does is it's like one of the greatest forces for anti-racism. Like you're saying, it brings people together. It makes people think, oh, we're gonna party, but you got to check yourself and get into social justice and all that. Have you noticed that? Is that becoming more prevalent? People claiming this name, but being just as equally offended with not being called it as they are ignorant of the actual work that you're doing to study and teach and represent it.
Yes. To answer both questions, I think in case of what Professor Markle said, for me, if I consider myself a scholar, a Black scholar nowadays, right, specialized in anti-racism and in critical race theory, diaspora, etc., that was through hip hop. Because hip hop, I was a nerd. I always have been a nerd, right? I would be a scholar or I would be a professional anyway, because that was the kind of environment I was raised in. Even I was raised in a poor community, but my parents were very like, okay, you have to study, go, right? And I have older siblings who did the same to me, for me. But hip hop was critical for me to have my racial awareness. And with 12 years old, I start to read things that I would not have access, like Malcolm X's autobiography, Dr. King says, History and Culture of African American History and Culture, for a 12 years old teenager in the ghetto in São Paulo, like who doesn't even speak any English. So hip hop gave that to me. You know, so a lot of the knowledge that I have nowadays that people hear you say, oh, you have so much knowledge. I didn't achieve that in this past 8 years during a PhD. I constructed that through my whole life, and it started with hip hop. Because even what I was already reading other things, hip hop gave me a direction. Right? It was my GPS pretty much, like, okay, read these. And okay, now you read this book by Alex Haley. Now you are going to read Roots. Now you are going to read like this book right here. And hip hop was the one who did that. So when I got to academia, what academia gave me was the tools to know how to verbalize that in a way that Eurocentric values are going to accept. That the standard or the, let's say, the official knowledge, right? It's going to be okay. So I know how to communicate. I can talk here with you guys and say, hey, what's up? But I also know, good afternoon. I'd like to introduce myself, right? And code switch, because we do that very well as Black people.
Right, of course.
First of all, we do that. So I can talk at the United Nations, but I can go to spoken words and talk in the same way. I do not have a problem with that, right? So hip hop was the first thing. The other things came later. Academia came much later.
That gets the platform to
exactly.
Hip hop exercise.
Exactly. With hip hop in Brazil specifically, here in the US, I see that a lot as well. But I think because Brazil has had for so many decades this idea of, okay, we are not going to commercialize. We are not going to be sold out. We don't want to reach that level of commercial hip hop of the US and etc. Always in comparison, because the US is the reference we have of consumerist hip hop, right? So I think now we are seeing more of that. Because back in the days, no one was making money, no one was on TV. So the 80s and 90s and even early 2000s were like us talking to us, for us, right? Very FUBU, like for us, by us. That was it. But now we have a broad audience, and especially white middle class and upper middle class people.
Even in Brazil?
Even in Brazil,
Okay.
but not millionaire rappers, but rappers talking to audience who are not black and poor. And so now we are experiencing that. And a lot of, we saw that a lot in this past 3 years since President Bolsonaro election, because he's a far rightist and he's a genocidal. And some people who are affiliated with him was claiming being part of hip hop. But one thing that is interesting, and we saw that here with Kanye and everything, right? But one thing in Brazil is that people in hip hop, on hip hop, tell this person, hell no. He's not part of hip hop. So people who don't know anything about hip hop won't know anything about hip hop anyway. But people who are part of hip hop say at the same time, no. We had that like 2 weeks ago on TV, main TV station in Brazil. A rapper from the capital of Brazil, Brasilia, went there and said, oh, I'm so glad we are doing this new hip hop thing, because first people were just talk about shooting and racism, and that's so old news. And people, old school people, start like, there was one rapper named Gogi, and he's old school from the beginning of hip hop. He's also from Brasilia. And he created like an Instagram live, just calling the guy and saying, hey, who do you think you are? You are saying you are hip hop? You should be careful with that, because hip hop is composed by 4 elements. Which element are you? Mm-hmm. So that happens a lot.
Just trying to erase the whole culture.
Yeah.
While holding a proud standard. I mean, that's the quintessential thing I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm sorry I have to cut this short, but Daniela, I'd be remiss without having to ask you this question, just because this is the last year you're with us. But one of the things that I'm kind of excited about is, this partnership, can continue after you leave Trinity. You're in hip hop studies, you're, remaining in America. Let's continue with our collaboration. But my question
and congratulations on that. Congratulations that you got,
yes,
in the midst of a pandemic.
I am leaving Trinity against my will. I love to. But I
wish we could keep you. Yeah, you have to go.
I'm really gonna miss you.
But you're still. But now you're part of the festival family. I want you to know that. But I do want to ask a question before we have about 5 minutes, but not so much about your lecture, because I think in some ways we've hinted to it, and people should go check it out. Day 1, Trinity Hip Hop Fest afterparty.live. You can check out our lecture. But I want you to. I know you were watching stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I know you were watching the fest. What was your viewer experience like? What was your takeaways from watching the festival as an audience member? What did you watch? What did you like?
Yes, first of all, I want to say that I was already planning talking to you guys and say, how can I come to the festival next year? Because I didn't have a chance to attend the festival yet in person, right? I think the first thing I take was the quality of the artist. The performers were amazing. There was a group from where in West Africa? Where were they from?
East Africa, the Ugandans.
East Africa, yes, exactly. And I was amazed by that.
When they started the drums to open it, I was like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah, like Kid Freeze and Chilla Rock, the beat, like talking about that. But more important, and also I like the way how professional the students who are part of the Temple of Hip Hop were, like being MCs and everything as hosts. They were awesome. But one thing, more than share my own experience with that, I want to share what students told me. So part of the assignments for my students in both classes were to attend the Hip Hop Festival. And a couple of them wrote to me before attending the Hip Hop Festival. I only knew hip hop by what I see on media and all the things that people say about hip hop, bad things. But I was blind. The Hip Hop Festival opened my eyes for what hip hop really is. So I think that was something that touched my heart, and I know we are in the right path, because that's the idea. It's not that we have to dismiss everything that is available on the media, but it's to show that there are other things going on. We have a lot of underground artists who are awesome, who only don't have an opportunity. We have like community engaged hip hop right here in Hartford, right? And that's one thing that I told my students, like we are talking about global hip hop and how social justice and other struggles are being performed through hip hop. But if you want to get engaged with hip hop, you don't need to go anywhere. Hartford is right here.
Thank you.
The hip hop community in Hartford is strong.
So often people get into these initiatives. A perfect example of what, like, I was really asking you about on the last one, even deeper. Like, so often people get into these initiatives and they're like, oh, we need to reach out to this. And it's like, reach out to your coworker that's right there, that's in this group. Reach out to the people across the street that are in this group. Why are you going out of your way to like go around the world and make this like a new issue that you're discovering? Like, it's kind of like you're trying to stay in denial that you're part of this relationship on a regular basis, right? And you're on your block,
you
right?
need to do something. Oh, I need to do something about this, about the community. So go here, right here. You are going to spend 4 years on this campus where we have a community that is very in need of not volunteer or white savior syndrome, but in need of like support. So support the community that you are part of for this 4 years. And I sent a lot of them to the Temple of Hip-Hop. You are going, the next semester, you are going to receive a bunch of people there. But like, because for me, that's important. Like how, and I am so sad about the pandemic, of course, in addition to everything that brought, but because when I was starting to get close to the community, attending events and everything, the pandemic came and I was shut outside my house.
This fellowship wasn't supposed to go like this, Dan. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm part of me is like, well, we made it happen. But initially, when you accepted the position, 2 years, another hip hop scholar who's on the same page, community engagement, creative learning, and hip hop performance, all the package, and then the COVID happened. I just feel like, wow, this was the first hip hop. Yeah, it's unfortunate, but yes, you're coming. You're gonna come see the festival.
And please,
no
save
question.
My spot.
We're gonna make it happen. Yeah, we're gonna make it happen.
My spot. And Khaiim and his family are still owing me a lunch, a vegan lunch, because we are neighbors.
Yeah.
So save my spot for next year.
We really appreciate you. We really sorry we have to go, but that was our conversation with Dr. Daniela Gomes, McGill visiting assistant professor of international studies, hip hop scholar, educator, and was our featured lecturer, inaugural lecturer at the 15th Trinity International Hip Hop Festival. And we really appreciate you. We're going to be, again, you're part of the Trinity International Hip Hop family now. Really looking forward to the future. And thank you.
Thank you guys for inviting me. It was nice talking to you. And see you again, even with the
again soon. Appreciate you, y'all. All right.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.